The tradition of storytelling in many African cultures were mostly done through the sacred art of spoken word. But as time flowed, most of these precious stories began to lose their roots. They became like wildflowers swaying in the wind, settling anywhere, their origins fading into the mist of the forgotten days. But even though many of these stories might have lost their roots, their essence remain undeniably African. And it is one of these stories I'll be sharing with you here today. Once upon a time, on the western coast of Africa, there reigned a very legendary king, and he was called Ohene Appiah Asare Kubi. Ohene Appiah Asare Kubi was so powerful that he commanded respect from all corners of the earth. Yet beneath his formidable exterior was a heart filled with love and kindness. And amongst all the people who dwelled in his kingdom, there was one that held the key to his heart, the apple of his eye, his beloved son, Agyari. As years passed, Agyari grew into a fine young man, and soon it was time for Agyari to get married. So Ohene Appiah Kubi was determined to find his son the best bride. So he roamed his land and found Agyari 200 beautiful women. However, despite the king's efforts, none of these women captured Agyari's heart. Agyari looked at all the women that the king had brought before him and said, "I do not want any of these women. None of them are pretty, and I could not fall in love with any of them." Imagine the king's anger. The king was so disappointed, and then in his dissatisfaction, he gave out a decree that would send shockwaves throughout his kingdom. The decree stated that should Agyari find a woman who is much more prettier than any of the women that he, the king, found, the king will instantly kill Agyari's bride together with her whole family. The news of the king's decree spread like wildfire, and the people spoke of it with hushed voices and a heavy heart. Meanwhile, fate was still awake in the kingdom. For in Ohene Appiah's kingdom lived Mame Sewa and Ejata. They were a newly married couple, and they had welcomed into their family their firstborn child, a daughter, a very beautiful girl. Their daughter was so pretty, and they could see it. She was so pretty that her mere sight stirred fear in their hearts. So one day, Mame Sewa said to her husband, "Ata, let us kill this child and be free. We are barely living as it is. I mean, how long do we have to live like this? Is it my fault I gave birth to such a beautiful daughter?" But Ejata immediately shouted, "Sewa, how can you possibly suggest such an idea?" But Sewa immediately cut in, and she said, "You can act all innocent as you want, pretend all you want. I carried this child for 9 months under my skin. She's connected to me, and I love her more than you can ever imagine. But should the prince find this child and fall in love with her, the king will not only kill her, but us along with her. And what will happen to our family legacy? The lineage that you are so proud of will be cut off." Terrified for his life, Mame Sewa's argument began to make sense in the ears of Ejata. However, Ata was torn between desperation and love. He couldn't decide, but ultimately he had to come to a decision. So deep into the night, under the cloak of the dark, he ventured into the forest with his daughter in his arms and left her in the wilds to die. but the cries and screams of her child that evening pulled him back into the forest. And then he took her into his warm embrace. He soothed her tears, and there in seclusion, he vowed to protect his daughter from the harsh realities of this world. Ejata decided not to send her back home, for he really feared the wrath of his wife. You see, he found a cave where no one inhabited and kept her there. He named his daughter Aso, and Aso grew up, embraced and sheltered by the cave, unaware of the wonders and the dangers that lay beyond its boundaries. Her father was the sole human connection in her life, and Ejata always told Aso to keep herself hidden and never ever show herself in front of any other human being aside from him. So soon 15 years passed and faith intervened once again. One day, Prince Agyari decided to embark on a hunting expedition, and during his hunt he saw a very beautiful bird, and immediately he knew he wanted the bird for himself. So wherever the bird flew, he followed, and the bird flew into a certain cave, and then he entered into the cave as well. But when he got into the cave, the bird became a tertiary issue because what he saw made his heart beat with nervousness. There she was, a sight to behold, the apple of his eye, a wonder. Aso's unparalleled beauty mesmerized the heart of Agyari. To make you really understand how Agyari felt in that moment, I want you to imagine a woman sculptured to perfection by the hands of the gods. Imagine her shadow-moon black afro hair, her soft skin, her beautiful dark brown eyes, those eyes that hold earthquakes that pull men to their knees. Such was the beauty of Aso. Agyari instantly knew that she was the one, the flesh of his flesh. So he tried to speak with Aso, but then Aso retreated. And an emotion of fear and curiosity also ignited inside Aso. But Aso remembered what her father always told her: never show yourself to any human aside from me. Humans are wicked, and humans will bring you pain. So she hid from Agyari, and Agyari could sense Aso's fear, so he calmly approached Aso, and soon she softened up to him. After all, she was also curious about the outside world. So they talked and laughed, and soon they were deep and lost inside the comforts of each other. They barely even realized that it was night time. And as always, Ejata had come in the evening to deliver food to Aso. When he saw Prince Agyari, oh God, his heart sank with terror. What he feared the most had come to pass. All these years, Ejata had tried as much as he could to keep his daughter away from anybody. And yet, the person he really wanted to keep his daughter from had only intentionally found her. Ejata could see the faint bond and connection that had formed between his daughter and the prince, and instantly he made it known to the prince that he shall not give Aso to him, not under any circumstance. Ejata warned the prince to stay away from Aso, stay away from my daughter. But the prince pleaded that he would make things right. He would get the confirmation from his father before he takes Aso as wife. But fearing the wrath of his father, Prince Agyari went home and confided in his mother, Obapenyi Efia Akoto, unveiling that he had fallen in love with a very beautiful woman called Aso, and he would like to take Aso as wife. The queen mother, who was eager to see his son finally get married, decided to plot against her beloved, the king. She was determined to save her son's life and the woman who had captured his heart. So she began to monitor the king. And one day when Ohene Apiakubi was in a very good mood, she realized it, and then she took wine and went into his chambers. She fed him. He drank and drank until he was sinking deep in drunkenness. And then she had him exactly where he wanted him. Then she brought up the law regarding her son's marriage. She convinced him to change the law. And that evening, immediately, a new law was enacted. The following day, when the king awoke from his slumber, people were celebrating, feasting, dancing, rejoicing. His son, Agyari, was getting married, so he was told. Ohene Apiakubi discovered that a new law had been passed, one that granted his son the freedom to marry whoever he chose. And he immediately realized that the queen had tricked him in his drunken state. But a king's word once spoken can never be taken back until it has fulfilled its intended purpose. And so Prince Agyari and the beautiful Aso got married and began the journey of their life. And there was nothing the king could do to stop this marriage because a decree had already been given. So what do you think happened to Aso's mother after she found out that her supposedly dead child has been living all this while, and what's more, she's getting married to the prince? Her reaction was worth billions of dollars, priceless, and yet Aso found it in her spirit to forgive her. Just think about this. When the person who is responsible for protecting you, the person who is to love you, discards you when you need them the most, can you find it in you to forgive them? It can be very impossible to forgive, but let us try and put on the breastplate of forgiveness, because when we learn to forgive, it will heal our hearts and mend our soul. It is for us than for them. Thank you very much for listening and for tuning in. I am grateful that you stayed with me and watched this video till the end. There'll be more interesting African stories, myth and tales coming up. So if you enjoyed listening to this story, then please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and help me grow this community. Bye guys, I'll see you soon.